Welcome, everyone, to the Franklin Factor podcast. I am Danielle Weiss, agent here with the Franklin team, your co-host for this podcast. I'm here with my other co-host, Sarah Franklin Savard, the beautiful rock star herself. And I'm excited to start this with you.
I'm so excited, Danielle. Thank you.
Yes, it's our launch day. And so we were going back and forth talking about where do we start. And I think it would just make sense for us to kind of backtrack to the origin of the Franklin team and give our listeners kind of the background and the history of what this team has been built on and where it comes from. So we're going to dive into that today.
Yeah, super exciting.
Cool. So Sarah, I know a little bit about your background, but for our listeners, let's start from the beginning. When did you get into real estate? What inspired you to get into real estate, and kind of give us that background?
Yes. So I'll even go back a little further because my dad, Jimmy Franklin, who was the founder of the Franklin team, he started the team. I guess it wasn't a team back then. It was just, he was a sole agent probably 42 years ago, 43 maybe. I'd have to go back and check dates and everything, but right before I was born. And so I had been around it obviously my whole life. But when I actually officially got into the business was right around when I was 16 years old, got a car and did the early release from school program and was like a runner. So I did running of the signs, the lock boxes, and then I did, I think they had like a builder account early on where I did MLS inputting as well. And then went to college. And then shortly after college, I was recruited to a builder services company. It's a great company. I got to learn a lot about working in the industry and working in a professional setting. So once after that, I was really kind of just sitting at a desk, and my dad said, why don't you get your license and come and work with me? So I was a little skeptical, not sure I really wanted to do that, work with him. So he thought, well, why don't you go and I got you an interview at David Weekley Homes to be a builder salesperson. And so I had an interview set up. I don't know if you knew this story. Mm-mm. I had an interview set up, and a couple days before he said, well, why don't you just get your license and work with me? And so he convinced me. And so I never even actually did the interview.
Sorry, David Weekley.
Yeah. So he was like, let's get the license. You can't come and join until you have your license. So I spent 30 days getting the license and then came and worked for him. I was definitely skeptical because obviously I'd gotten a college degree and thought I was just amazing badass. I didn't want to go work for my dad.
We all at that age.
So came and worked with him, or came and took the leap. And he really was not this micromanager and, watching awesome. Every move. I started learning, I was more like his assistant and learned a lot of the business from then. That was in 2007.
Okay.
I think, yes. And so been doing that since. So got in right before the financial crisis in 2008. I had no idea really for years what that really, because I joined so early that it seemed normal.
Okay. So you had a few years. So you come into the picture and you start immediately helping your dad and day-to-day operations, it sounds like, right? So
yes.
At this point, you had no vision necessarily to take over the business. You're an acting agent, you're helping out with your dad's business. And then I know that Andrew, your brother, comes into the picture at some point. And it's a whole family business. So talk to us about that. So
in 2007 to 2010, I think, or maybe even 2009, kind of learning the business, doing a lot of the back end stuff, the operation side. Like you said, I convinced him to get emails with a domain instead of an AOL email and trying to get a CRM in place, stuff like that. But I was working with buyers. I became very confident with buyers. I loved showing property and it was great. So I learned that side of the business. And then my dad started to try to convince me to do some more listings. And I remember a listing that we'll probably talk about when we do interview him, but I was very, very not sure about that. I did not have the confidence. I was really concerned about walking into someone's home and telling them what it was worth. Finally wrapped my head around that and started doing okay with it, doing really well, and started to do pretty good in the business. And my brother, Andrew, was at this time maybe in New York City, and he was working 60 plus hours, maybe even more than that, a week. And we were making about comparable money. And he was like, what am I doing? Why, maybe I should entertain this. So he then got relocated to Dallas, and that was the closest he was going to get to back home. And then my dad said, hey, he had an unfortunate situation and wasn't happy and at his other job. And so he said, why don't you get your license? He did it within like a week, I think. So he came, I think that was 2012 or 13. And at the time, he just came to be an agent as well. He didn't do a lot of the background work. So he was literally just thrown in kind of a different scenario than me.
Into the sales portion.
And literally was doing sales from day one. But we still at that time did not know that we were going to be taking over or
That's
had
what I was
any
going to ask, right? Like, because did your dad have any kind of plan to not hand over, you guys ultimately purchased the business from your dad. What was that process like? Like what conversations, like obviously again, you and Andrew probably were like, I just need a job. I want to make money. Sure. Let's go do this real estate thing. Gets me home to Houston. And then fast forward 10 years, or how many years now? 13 years, you guys are running a multiple businesses that have all come from starting the Franklin team. So talk about just that. When did it click of you were taking over the business, or we may be more than just agents?
Yeah. So he was at the time had a property in the hill country and was kind of going back and forth. He was wanting to spend more time there. In that 2012, 2013 timeframe, I believe, he met his now wife and my stepmom and decided she was living in Austin. And so they wanted to be more so there. And that's when he was like, okay, I've got Andrew and Sarah. They're doing great. Like, let's kind of phase them into it. So we did an agreement where we were purchasing the company from him over a certain amount of years. And that's just kind of how it went. We sat down and we're like, what's our vision? What do we want to do? Dad had for so many years kept the business small for what it's worth. Like He didn't want to manage agents. He had been a broker years before. So he didn't want to manage agents. He didn't want to have a big team because he was closing in on retiring. And here we are, much younger. And at that time thinking, well, we should take this. These are some awesome programs. Like we should go and get more builder accounts. We should go and we can really make this a big thing. And I don't think we really had any idea what it would become, what it has and what it is now. But we did know that we wanted to grow. That was always our vision. So It's been interesting, roller coaster getting there because there's, positive turns one way, negative turns another. But as you know, Danielle, I've been on our team for several years. Yeah, that's kind of where we are.
That's awesome.
Fast forward to now.
So what I like about this conversation is it's allowing the listeners to hear, right? It's a family business that started with your dad over 40 years ago. And we'll get to hear his story about what that journey was like. I appreciate and value you and Andrew really had to learn the ropes and you had to earn the right to take over the business, right? With a good mentor, your dad, who obviously was invested in you guys. But I really appreciate that. It wasn't just something that it was like, oh, my kids automatically. There was a time period of you were learning it. And there was an option too of you saying, this isn't for me, but you guys have stuck together. And then let's go back to those first early years. I wasn't on the team back then, but it was a smaller team, right? Just until the last few years, we've really grown and, close hundreds, thousands of transactions a year. But talk to me about 10 years ago. When you were first on, how many employees or what did the team dynamic look like?
Yeah, it was definitely much smaller. You're right. I would say we really had maybe one or two agents that worked, with listings and buying, but I would say primarily would get a lot of our buyer leads. And then there were just a few of us that focused on builders. We did not have a retail division. We never purchased leads. We literally were taking any, referrals from past clients. We did not do big marketing. When Andrew and I took over, we kind of dabbled in Zillow for a few months. That was the only thing closest, and we didn't know what we were doing. Yeah. And so, but early on, there was just a few of us, and things were very outdated. Like one of the things that we had is our client list was in Excel. We did not have a CRM. Our first CRM that we brought in was called Top Producer, and that was like, oh my gosh, all this technology, because we'd done it without technology for so long. And so it was interesting to see kind of how things, we got smarter about, using more technology and stuff like that. But then also just in the last several years, we grew and grew still with like getting more production, but we never were really bringing on new agents necessarily. We didn't have like, a recruiting trying to get more agents until the last several years when COVID happened. And COVID is when we started to notice our builder programs were not being needed because the builder program is to remove contingencies, and builders weren't needing that. Homes were flying off the market.
Yes.
So we were like, how can we need to, make a change here so we don't become obsolete, right? And so we started down the like purchasing lead route, which we never had done before. So,
and I think all in that time, there's a few things that I know the team did do that, for me, understanding the history, really took you guys from this family small business that was always growing, a certain amount year over year to really becoming a very well-known, branded, reputable, very high volume type of team, but also in a sense with my background, and I think a lot of listeners, regardless if they're on a small team or a large team, I think it is very interesting to hear how you guys really took that in a matter of just a few years through COVID with different challenges facing time again, like, right, the programs essential to your business, all of a sudden not there or no demand for that. What do we do, right? So let's talk about agents listening, team leaders listening. They have challenges and they want to thrive through success. So when you were facing that COVID challenge and you're talking about, we did a few key things, do you attribute that to certain key hires or systems?
That's a good question. I mean, I think what happened is, we had a shutdown, right? And everybody, like every entrepreneur, anybody that owns a business or even doesn't even have to own a business, is just an employee, was concerned. Like, what does this mean? We've never lived through something like this.
Yeah.
So it was quiet for
people were jumping
weeks.
ship. Agents were like, can't do this. And then everyone wanted to get on board.
It was weird. They dropped the rates and it was like, oh my goodness. But it was really scary during those first couple weeks where the phone did not ring. And it was like, what are we going to do? We did lay off 2 people. That it was a very, very hard thing. As soon as we could, we hired one right back who's still on our team today.
Love her.
But it was definitely things that we had to like pivot. And how are we going to pivot? What do we see? And I have to say, I don't want to take credit for this. Andrew was really good at like studying and like hearing what other people were doing in other markets. And he said, let's give it a try. We did try different avenues for a while to see which would make, would work the best. But at that time we were like, we also need to hire agents. And
so let me pause you real quick, because I think a lot of our listeners, if they don't understand the history of Jimmy and then you and Andrew and the agents on the team, are really primarily outside of Sphere and personal business, was really builder driven business, right?
Yes, 60% was builder
because of the programs that the Franklin team has always offered and that we still offer. So right around this time of COVID is what you're saying, those programs were not a demand. And so now we're going, how are we going to float and bring in business? And just like every other agent, they have to be what we now call retail division, but buying leads essentially, right? You guys had never really bought leads at all.
No, all of the leads that we had up until like 2020 were sign calls or just, website calls.
Or probably repeat business,
Sphere business, stuff like that. But we never purchased leads. And so when we decided to kind of dabble in that, at the time, we were wanting to make sure we had leads so those agents could feed themselves and feed their family, right? We can't, and we didn't want to have leads and then not have anybody to handle them. So we really wanted to make sure we were prepared. We're really big about trying to prepare when there is going to be some kind of change, get everything in order. And so I remember that we had some interviews with some agents, and you know the story about with Megan. I'll share. I'm sure we'll have her on at some point, but she was an agent Megan Wyatt was an agent coming to be a producer on our team, and came to me when I was at the office one day asking me, okay, so what's the plan for this? What's the plan for that? And at the time, our sales manager that we had she had just started, maybe. We could tell things were probably not going to work out. And I did mention to our partner and Andrew at the time and said, hey, what do you think about Megan? She's asking all the right questions. So lo and behold, now she is on our team and in a sales manager role. And she has been in charge of, like, since 2020, growing that retail division, managing those agents, putting in standards and stuff like that for a while. And it's crazy to look back because there was nothing of that 4.5 years ago. I mean, this is all started up and now we have 60 plus agents on our team.
And you know what I think is awesome about what you're sharing is you and Andrew and the team did not try to recreate something just out of thin air, right? It sounds like you guys turned to other successful teams. And that's the whole point of this podcast, right? Is sharing what we know and sharing the value of our team and what we're doing to be successful and collaborating. And you guys really saw what you were missing and you just decided to try it out, right? Or hire within, right? So Megan was already a part of the agent. And a lot of people sometimes think, oh, great, now listening to this podcast, I need to go hire and do all these things. Like working with what you have already and being a good steward of like, who do I have? Like, are they the right person, right seat? And you just even taking note of Megan and saying, hey, would this be a good fit? She's been doing the sales manager role for 4 years now, plus 5 years.
Yeah.
So, and going from probably 0 agents to 60 right now. So
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how much it's happened. And we're hoping that continues to grow, right? So we're always changing. I think that's part of being an entrepreneur is being able to look forward. Predicting was a big part of it. Andrew, I'm going to give him all the credit for this predicting. He could see that this builder focus was kind of, what are we going to do? And it all made sense. We were all on board. You're right. Like we've got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we did. Had we waited, much longer, may not have been as well as we had hoped. Right. So I think that's part of being an entrepreneur is always looking and trying to, what's the future hold and how am I going to get there? Kind of doing a layout like we do in EOS is like being a really good predictor of if this is what my goal is, how are we going to get there? And so that's another part that we could talk about later,
I was
right?
just going to say, right, that also came into the picture at this time and really helped the team develop the core values. And then I truly believe it's what's established the growth and helped retain the people and the agents that we have because we filter everything through those core values, decisions that we make, processes, changes, hiring, firing, all of that. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That was right around the same time. I think Megan came on board. I'm trying to remember like July-ish. And I think we did EOS. We started in like September, October. And it was a whole new, yeah, that's a good idea. EOS is Entrepreneurial Operating System. And if you've ever heard us speak about it, because we are a big proponent of it, we have several of our businesses actually on it as well. It's like an organizational system of an entrepreneurial organization. And so it helped us. I mean, I still remember early days of like coming up with who are key people, who are key staff members, agents, big people that we feel like are really a good symbol, or I don't know if symbol's the right word, but you know what I mean? Like a good characterization of our team and what we think. And we broke it down based on the values that those people have that we find so attractive. It's a really cool way of going about it. And we developed these core values that we've tweaked a little bit along the way, but they've stayed the same in the last 5 years. And we hire, like really hit everybody over the head with them early on when agents are joining the team, making sure that they do embody these because we do find it a big part of who we are. We want our reputation to be withheld, obviously. And I think a lot of companies don't really look at core values. I actually, when my first, the company I worked for before, I always thought the core values were kind of a hokey deal. Honestly, when they went over them and they had them, they did make a point to go over them, but I didn't really understand what it meant until we started teaching them and really, really, standing behind them. It can be very powerful for an organization, I believe.
Well, I believe that that attributes to you and Andrew and then your dad as well. I think everything trickles from the top down. And I can also say that core values can be a facade at some businesses and companies of like, here are the things that we believe are our core values. And then the fruit is not there of those things. And so I believe with the right pivoting and the decisions and the right people, and then also EOS and the core values, it's a huge...
And it's not just core values, right? Like EOS has so many ways of just organizing everybody on like goals, accountability, making sure everybody's on the same page, accountability. I mean,
transparency.
Transparency. And I know not like, we're speaking to other agents and other team leads and stuff that like, maybe that's not necessarily something they can do, but there's a lot of books and a lot of like research behind it that is available for free that you wouldn't have to. And I cannot speak more highly of how well it's helped us in our growth.
Yes, absolutely. So we've kind of talked about a lot, just a little bit of yours and Andrew's background, the growth, the key components of the success and of that kind of that 3-year, what's going on with COVID time. Now we're on the other side of that. And a lot of real estate professionals, entrepreneurs, agents, team leads, last year was a really hard year. And we had one of the best years that we've had. And I think trajectory this year, we're planning on doing the same. So what's next for the Franklin team? Like what vision does Andrew, the leadership team, do we have to look forward to? What are some big things for the Franklin team?
Yeah. So 2024 was interesting, right? Because we had the NAR settlement that anybody who's in real estate knows what I'm talking about. Ended up not being as bad as everybody freaked out it would be.
The amount of Zoom calls.
Oh my gosh. And all this stuff. And then ended up not even being but a little blip. So that was, positive. And I feel like that did not hold us back. I know some people didn't have as great of a year, but I don't think that had to do with the NAR settlement. I do know a lot of people that did leave the industry. But yes, one of our best years. Our goal is, of course, to always improve from the year before. So we do have big goals. Some of our biggest, I would say, goals for this year is to really like refine and like perfect our systems, because we do have plans to go into other markets in Texas. And so in order to do that, we want to make sure we've got everything down pat and that we're prepared. Like, we know that we want to grow. We want to be the best in Houston. We feel like we are the best in Houston and the best team, but now we're not settling there. We want to go and go to a different market and take over Texas. So I think that's kind of what our plan is. As far as this year, we may not be in those markets yet, but it's really trying to get everything in place to get there next year, if not sooner, if the right time comes awesome. Opportunity. Yeah.
We'll be talking about that on the podcast as well. So there's going to be a lot of different things that just with yours and Andrew's and the team's background that I think will provide a lot of just value for our listeners and people that come along for the ride. So, okay, as we wrap up, Sarah, just very cliche question. But what advice would you give to someone who's thinking of starting their own real estate team, or getting into the real estate industry? It may be two different pieces of advice, right? Somebody that's never been in the real estate industry that's coming, or they're in, but they want to grow a team or start a team. It could be the same or different, but what advice do you have?
So one of the things that I would say is probably the biggest advice I would give to an agent getting into the industry is being consistent. So I feel like you're constantly getting ideas, especially once you're in school, like getting your license. There's all these different avenues of how to get business and how to go about it. But whatever you choose is being consistent. I think a lot of people tend to get into this industry and be an agent because they want to be their own boss, and they believe they can do it, and you can do it. This is not necessarily a hard business to be in. I think it takes grit, and you have to be a self-starter. So being consistent is probably the biggest key, because it's not just waiting for the phone to ring. You have to go out. You have to be consistent on whatever you choose. If open houses are how you want to go about getting business, you are doing them multiple a weekend, or multiple, never take a weekend off kind of scenario. Or if it's, being a dialer and calling expired leads, that you're always doing that and being consistent, because it isn't going to just happen after, doing it for a couple times. It's going to take a time before you start reaping the benefits of it. And I think that's one of the things that we see a lot at you too. Yeah. I don't know what you would maybe have some advice as well, what you've seen.
Yeah, I think just failing to plan, right? Plan to fail. And so exactly what you're saying. I mean, I never was an independent agent. I always was a part of a team. And to me, that was important, because yes, I'm a self-starter, and yes, I'm smart and I can figure things out and I'm consistent and I can follow a plan, but I needed guidance. I needed accountability. I also needed a paycheck. And so there's a lot of value on the team, which we're going to be talking in an upcoming video on, maybe a little controversial, like, should I join a team? Should I not? There's totally different opposing sides to that, but I think there can be a balance. And For me, I would agree with you. Focus one thing at a
Focus.
time,
Yes.
right? Master that thing, and then you can add, right? You don't want to be spinning 5 different plates when you can't spin the first one.
Yeah, because you can only do a certain amount good.
Yes.
You know, it's
Why do you think
focusing
I
on
always
one.
stayed on the listing side?
Exactly.
I need to master this first. So.
Exactly. Yes.
Anyway.
And we'll be able to talk about that in
Yes.
future episodes too.
Yes.
So awesome. Well, this was so fun.
Yes.
So I hope everybody had some value and will listen to us again. We'll have some fun episodes that we already have planned that we'll be recording here soon.
Yes. Great conversation. So comment, subscribe to our channel, to our team, thefranklinteaminc.com for our website. Thank you again, Sarah. I'm looking forward to more conversations.
Thanks, Danielle.
Yes.